The setting was a lavish, upscale restaurant in the heart of New York City, a place where the hum of quiet conversations mingled with the gentle clinking of silverware. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting light onto immaculately set tables adorned with fine linen and fresh flowers. Gregory Whitman, a white millionaire in his early 60s, sat at his favorite corner table, sipping a glass of Bordeaux. His tailored suit and expensive watch signaled his wealth, but his demeanor carried an air of entitlement. Gregory had a reputation for testing people. He believed that trust was a commodity earned, not given, and he prided himself on being a good judge of character, or so he thought. Employees, business partners, even strangers had unknowingly been subjected to his subtle but calculated trials. Today, however, Gregory was conducting a different kind of test, one that revealed more about his own biases than anyone else's character. His target was Aisha, a young black waitress who had been serving his table. Aisha moved with efficiency and grace, balancing trays with ease while managing the demands of the restaurant's high-profile clientele. Despite her calm exterior, Gregory noticed her moments of quiet fatigue, a slight slump in her shoulders when she thought no one was looking, or the way her smile faded as she turned away from a particularly difficult customer. Gregory's interest in her wasn't benign. It wasn't curiosity about her struggles or admiration for her professionalism. Instead, it was a patronizing, unspoken skepticism, a belief that her integrity could be easily tested and most likely found lacking. As the meal concluded, Gregory pulled out his wallet to pay the hefty bill. The wallet was an object of pride, sleek and heavy with cash, credit cards, and even a rare gold coin he carried as a conversation starter. With a calculated air of distraction, he placed the wallet on the edge of the table while pretending to check something on his phone. Then, as if he were in a hurry, he rose abruptly, leaving the wallet behind. The plan was simple: walk out, wait, and see what she would do. Would she pocket it, leave it, try to return it? "Let's see if she's as honest as she looks," Gregory muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with both curiosity and condescension. He exited the restaurant, taking a seat at an outdoor cafe across the street where he could discreetly watch through the restaurant's large glass windows. From his vantage point, he saw Aisha approach the table. She paused, her eyes landing on the wallet he had so obviously left behind. Gregory leaned back in his chair, smugly confident that his test would reveal some hidden truth about her. Little did he know, this test would end up revealing far more about himself. Aisha spotted the wallet almost immediately as she approached the now vacant table. It sat there, gleaming under the restaurant's ambient lighting, practically daring her to make a choice. Her hands, tired from carrying trays all day, hesitated for a moment before she picked it up. It wasn't unusual for customers to leave behind personal items: phones, sunglasses, even wallets. But something about this felt different. Gregory Whitman had been an unusual customer. His demeanor, his lack of warmth, and the way he avoided looking directly at her stuck in her mind. He hadn't thanked her when she served him, and hadn't left a tip, despite his evident wealth. She couldn't help but feel that he'd viewed her as invisible or insignificant. Now, holding the wallet, she couldn't ignore a gnawing suspicion. Was this a test? Her thoughts raced. What if he accused her of stealing it, even if she returned it? People like him, wealthy, influential, and white, held power that could ruin someone like her. She had worked too hard to build her reputation. As a single mother of 2 young children, every decision she made carried weight. One mistake, one misunderstanding, could cost her everything. But another thought came to mind. What kind of person would I be if I didn't do the right thing? Aisha took a deep breath, clutching the wallet tightly. Her conscience guided her as it always did, despite the challenges life had thrown her way. She thought of her children, especially her eldest, Malik, who often asked her questions about right and wrong. What kind of example would she set for him if she didn't act with integrity, even when no one was watching? She turned toward the kitchen, walking past tables where diners chatted over their expensive meals, oblivious to the quiet moral dilemma playing out just a few feet away. When she reached the manager's office, she knocked lightly and stepped inside. "Hey, Aisha," her manager Maria greeted her. "What's up?" "I found this," Aisha said, holding out the wallet. "It belongs to Mr. Whitman, the customer from table 4T. Maria raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Wow, that guy didn't even leave a tip. You could have just, well, you know. Aisha shook her head firmly. That's not who I am, Maria smiled. I'll hold on to it until he comes back looking for it. You did the right thing, Aisha. Thanks. As Aisha walked back to the dining area, a wave of relief washed over her, but it was tinged with unease. Something about Gregory's demeanor earlier made her wonder if this was more than just an accident. Why did it feel like this was a setup? Still, she brushed the thought aside. She had done her part. Whatever Gregory's intentions were, they wouldn't change who she was. Her values were unshakable, and no one, not even a wealthy, condescending customer, could take that from her. Unbeknownst to her, Gregory was sitting across the street, watching every move she made through the restaurant's windows. He saw her walk to the manager's office with the wallet in hand. His smug confidence began to waver. Interesting, he muttered to himself, though he wasn't ready to give her the benefit of the doubt just yet. For Aisha, the moment was over. For Gregory, it was only just beginning. An hour later, Gregory Whitman strolled back into the restaurant. His walk was slow and deliberate, his expression carefully calculated, a mix of feigned concern and mild irritation. As he approached the hostess stand, he smoothed his tie and cleared his throat, ensuring he looked every bit the composed, respectable millionaire. I believe I left my wallet here earlier, he said, his tone loud enough for nearby patrons to hear. I trust it hasn't gone missing. The hostess, momentarily taken aback, nodded politely. One moment, sir. Let me check with the manager. Gregory glanced around the dining room as he waited, his eyes darting to see if Aisha was nearby. She was, clearing plates from a table in the corner, her expression calm and focused. Her lack of visible guilt annoyed him. Shouldn't she at least look nervous? Moments later, Maria, the manager, emerged from her office with the wallet in hand. Gregory noticed it was exactly as he had left it, the leather still pristine and unscuffed. As Maria handed it to him, she smiled slightly. Here you go, Mr. Whitman. One of our servers found it and turned it in immediately, Maria said with a subtle emphasis on the word immediately. Gregory's eyes flicked toward Aisha, who had paused her work to watch the exchange. Maria continued, her voice light but pointed. She didn't hesitate for a second. She wanted to make sure it got back to its rightful owner. Gregory's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. That's good to hear, he said flatly. He opened the wallet and inspected its contents, cash, cards, even the gold coin, all present and accounted for. Satisfied but still unwilling to let go of his preconceptions, he turned toward Aisha, who stood calmly, her posture straight and unflinching. He took a step closer, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. You found this? He asked, his voice laced with condescension. Yes, sir, Aisha replied evenly. Her tone wasn't defensive, but it wasn't deferential either. I found it on your table after you left. Gregory studied her face, searching for any flicker of dishonesty or discomfort. But there was none. Instead, her steady gaze met his, unwavering. Well, he said after a pause, you're an honest woman. Aisha didn't flinch. I believe honesty is the only way to live, sir. It's how I raise my kids. The mention of her children caught Gregory off guard, though he masked it quickly. He nodded stiffly, struggling to maintain his air of superiority. Good, that's good. I'm sure you've taught them well. Aisha's lips twitched into a faint smile, though her eyes remained steady. Thank you, sir. For a moment, the dining room felt quieter, the tension between them palpable. Nearby diners glanced curiously at the exchange, sensing the charged atmosphere without understanding its context. Gregory, feeling increasingly uncomfortable under the weight of Aisha's quiet dignity, turned abruptly toward the door. As he walked away, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. At least someone around here knows the value of integrity. But as he exited, his thoughts were far less composed. A nagging discomfort settled in his chest. He had expected a different outcome, an excuse to confirm his biases. Instead, Aisha's actions and calm demeanor had forced him to confront something he wasn't ready to face, the ugliness of his own assumptions. From her place in the dining room, Aisha watched Gregory leave. She felt no triumph, no sense of satisfaction. She had done what she always did, acted with integrity, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Yet as she returned to clearing tables, she couldn't shake the feeling that the moment had been larger than it seemed. A ripple in a much bigger ocean. Gregory, meanwhile, crossed the street to his usual cafe, the wallet clutched tightly in his hand. For the first time in years, he felt unsettled, as if a mirror had been held up to him, showing a reflection he wasn't prepared to see. Gregory Whitman sat at the cafe across the street, his untouched espresso growing cold. The wallet he had so carelessly left behind was now clutched tightly in his hand, a symbol of something far greater than its contents. He had expected to feel vindicated, mug in the knowledge that his test would expose Aisha's character flaws. Instead, he felt something entirely foreign: discomfort. For years, Gregory had prided himself on being a shrewd judge of people. His life of privilege had taught him to view others through a lens of skepticism, particularly those who didn't move in his rarefied social circles. Yet here he was, forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that Aisha had shown more integrity than he had expected, or perhaps more than he deserved. The memory of her steady gaze lingered in his mind. She hadn't flinched under his scrutiny or attempted to ingratiate herself. Instead, her words had been clear and deliberate. "I believe honesty is the only way to live." It wasn't just her actions that had challenged him. It was her calm confidence, her refusal to be diminished by his assumptions. Gregory shifted in his chair, his thoughts swirling. He considered the implications of what he had done. He hadn't simply left his wallet behind. He had created a situation designed to bait someone into failure. And for what? To confirm a prejudice he wasn't even willing to admit to himself? As Gregory stared out the window, watching the restaurant's patrons come and go, he began to reflect on his life. He had always believed his wealth and status gave him the right to test others, to place himself in the role of arbiter over people he considered beneath him. But Aisha's quiet dignity had upended that belief. She hadn't just passed his test, she had exposed its cruelty. The question gnawed at him. Why had I assumed she would fail? Gregory thought back to the countless times he had judged others unfairly, often without realizing it. Was it habit, conditioning, or was it something darker, rooted in his upbringing and the privilege he had never questioned? Aisha had forced him to confront these questions, and for once, he couldn't dismiss them. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, staring at it for a moment before sliding it back in. A gesture, felt inadequate. This wasn't about money. It was about recognition, about undoing the harm caused by his actions. But how? The next day, Gregory returned to the restaurant. He wore no suit this time, no airs of superiority. Instead, he carried a small envelope in his hand and a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. As he walked through the door, the hostess greeted him, her surprise evident. "Mr. Whitman," she said, glancing toward the dining room. "Back so soon?" "I'd like to speak to Aisha," Gregory replied, his tone softer than usual. The hostess nodded and disappeared into the back. A few moments later, Aisha emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was neutral but curious as she approached him. "Good afternoon, sir," she said then. "How can I help you?" Gregory hesitated, feeling an unfamiliar weight in his chest. For a man accustomed to commanding rooms and people, apologizing felt foreign. But he pressed on. "I wanted to thank you," he began, his voice steady but earnest, "for your honesty and for reminding me of something important." Aisha tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. "And what's that, sir?" "That character," Gregory said, pausing to find the right words, "isn't something you can test or measure. It's something you live, and you've shown more character in one day than I've managed in decades." Aisha blinked, clearly taken aback by the unexpected sincerity. Gregory extended the envelope toward her. "It's not much," he said. "Just a small note of thanks, but more importantly, it's an apology for the assumptions I made and for testing you in a way that wasn't fair." Aisha hesitated, then took the envelope, her fingers brushing the edges as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Thank you for your honesty and integrity." You reminded me that the greatest wealth anyone can possess is character. I hope this small gesture shows my gratitude and regret." Tucked alongside the note was a check for a significant amount, enough to ease some of the financial burdens Aisha had been quietly carrying. She looked up at Gregory, her face a mix of surprise and gratitude. "I didn't do it for a reward," she said softly. "I know," Gregory replied. "That's why you deserve it." As Gregory left the restaurant, a strange sense of peace settled over him. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, as though a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted. He knew the gesture didn't erase his past mistakes or undo years of prejudice, but it was a step, a small but meaningful step, toward becoming the man he wanted to be. For Aisha, the moment was humbling yet affirming. She had acted out of principle, never expecting recognition or reward. Gregory's gesture, however, was a reminder that integrity, even when unnoticed, could inspire change in unexpected ways. The story didn't end there. News of the incident spread among the restaurant staff and their community, becoming a testament to the power of honesty and dignity. For Gregory, it marked the beginning of a slow but transformative journey. And for Aisha, it was a reaffirmation of the values she held dear, not just for herself, but for her children and the world they would inherit. Aisha returned to her shift that evening, her mind occupied with what had just transpired. The envelope Gregory had left for her wasn't just a financial gift. It was a validation of her values and the way she chose to live her life. She placed the check in her bag carefully, already imagining how it could help her children, Malik and Jada. New clothes for school, savings for a college fund, perhaps even some overdue repairs to their small apartment. But beyond the practical benefits, Gregory's words stayed with her. Character isn't something you can test, it's something you live. She had always believed this, but hearing it from someone who had once doubted her integrity reinforced her faith in the power of living honestly, even when the world seemed stacked against her. That night, over dinner with her children, she told them about the incident, not to boast, but to teach. "When you're faced with a choice," she said, her voice steady, "always do what's right, even if no one's watching. Your character is the one thing no one can take from you." Malik, her 10-year-old, looked at her with wide eyes. "Is that why you always say we have to tell the truth?" "Exactly," Aisha said, smiling. "Because the truth, no matter how hard it is, will always carry you further than a lie." Word of Gregory's apology and his gesture quickly spread among the restaurant staff. For many of them, it was a moment of quiet triumph, especially those who had experienced similar dismissive attitudes from wealthy patrons. Gregory had been a regular customer, and his entitled demeanor was well known among the staff. The fact that someone like him had not only admitted his mistake but also gone out of his way to make amends felt significant. Maria, the manager, shared the story with the team during a staff meeting the next day. "This is what integrity looks like," she said, pointing to Aisha. "It's not about what people think of you, it's about what you think of yourself." And Aisha showed us all how it's done. The staff applauded, some even teary-eyed. For many, Aisha's actions were a reminder that dignity and hard work still mattered in a world that often seemed indifferent. For Gregory, the incident marked the beginning of an internal reckoning. His wealth and privilege had shielded him from the experiences of people like Aisha, but her honesty and grace had pierced that bubble. He couldn't stop thinking about the moment she handed his wallet to the manager, her expression calm and unflinching, or the conviction in her voice when she said, "I believe honesty is the only way to live." In the weeks that followed, Gregory began to make changes. Small at first, but meaningful. He started paying closer attention to the people around him, particularly those who worked in roles often overlooked. The janitors in his office building, the baristas who made his coffee, the delivery drivers who brought packages to his door. He made it a point to greet them, thank them, and, when possible, tip them generously. He also began reading about systemic inequality, something he had long ignored. For the first time, he acknowledged that his assumptions about people like Aisha had been shaped by privilege and bias. It was an uncomfortable realization, but one he knew he needed to confront. One day, Gregory found himself writing a letter to Aisha, though he didn't intend to send it. In it, he wrote, "You taught me more in one afternoon than I've learned in a lifetime of privilege. I see now that wealth doesn't make a person good. Actions do. Thank you for showing me the value of integrity and for forcing me to confront my own shortcomings. I hope I can one day live with half the grace and dignity you showed that day." He tucked the letter away in a drawer, a reminder of the lesson he hoped to carry forward.